Hello, I'm Heidi Seaborn, and I'm a poet, and I am the author of the Pank Poetry Prize winning An Insomniac Slumber Party with Marilyn Monroe. And I'm here to talk about Marilyn on this day, 59 years after she died, after we've lost Marilyn. And I wanted to start with a bit of Marilyn's poetry. We were very lucky to get this book, Fragments, which was compiled by Stanley Buchtal and Bernard Conant. And in it, we have her letters, we have her journal entries, and we have her poems. And this book, along with so many others that people have written, and Marilyn's movies and her biographies and autobiography and everything that the websites and everything contributed to my learning about Marilyn, which contributed to my book. But I'd like to start with just a few words by Marilyn. Stones on the walk, every color there is. I stare down at you like a horizon, the space. The air is between us, beckoning, and I am many stories up, my feet frightened as I grasp towards you. She was a lovely poet, not skilled, didn't have the opportunity that I've had or many have had to study, to learn, but her instincts were really, really strong, and she was fantastic in terms of her wanting to learn and her learning from other poets. She brought poems and poetry into her life, and she brought poets into her life. So what I'd love to do is just spend some time reading some poems and answering questions and talking to you about what I've learned in the 3 years that I studied and wrote about Marilyn and as Marilyn Monroe. So I'll start there. 3 years ago, I was just beginning a Master in Fine Arts program in poetry with NYU. And I had this idea of wanting to explore our performance culture like this, Facebook and social media, and how we are all performing some version of ourselves. And I was also interested in our adulation of celebrities, and I thought, it'd be so interesting to write in the persona of a celebrity who is always performing. And when I thought about it, who better than Marilyn, right? I mean, Marilyn, who even now, today, 59 years after she left this earth, is still the world's most famous celebrity. It's amazing, and it means that there was something very special going on with her. And so I sought to understand that. And for those of you who have come to Marilyn early in life, who fell in love with her for one reason or another, I wasn't you, but I came to have that appreciation. And so I started doing research, and I read, as I said, lots and lots of biographies. I read fragments. I then went on the internet and started doing all sorts of research. I read scholarly books, and I went to the fan clubs. I started this, the Marilyn Monroe Poetry Project, to really understand her relationship with fans, even today. And so I did a lot of research, and what I learned is that Marilyn was an amazing spirit. And my professor, when I was finishing up this project, my thesis, which was my thesis, said, "What is it about you and Marilyn? What have you come to learn about Marilyn? What were your commonalities?" And there were so many, but one of the things that was most evident was that as insomniacs. Both Marilyn and I have suffered from insomnia. Um, I think it changes everything. It impacts everything. And in the case of Marilyn, her insomnia, which was sparked by some of the anxieties that she experienced from her very difficult childhood, that insomnia then led to, with the studio's help, sadly, led to an addiction to barbiturates so she could sleep. And in my view, that led to her her demise because she overdosed on barbiturates. And what I discovered in the process of writing this book is that I too suffered from an addiction. To cope with my own insomnia, I, from time to time, have taken Ambien, and while you can manage that, I had become kind of deeply addicted to it. And like barbiturates, it's not as serious, but it does, you do need to take more of them to get an effect. And so that was sort of where I ended up. And so that's how the book took this turn of being an insomniac slumber party with Marilyn Monroe. It's a conversation that happens in the middle of the night. It's a slumber party between the speaker in this, which is a version of the poet, me, and Marilyn. And we're in conversation talking about what people do in a slumber party. You tell your secrets, you tell your fears, you revisit everything that's gone on in your lives. And so that's what happens in here. I'm going to I'll just read the first couple poems and talk a little bit about that. And then I'm going to read a few more and talk about those as well as we go along. The first poem is called Insomnia Diary, and it's actually a long poem that's then scattered throughout the book. Insomnia Diary, 1:28 a.m. I've taken Ambien every day this week. On Tuesday, a quarter tab. By Thursday, a half. My pillow bucks. Crows peck the skylight and the moon's a neon fog. My love breathes through his mouth, flaming a fire. I close my eyes to the smoke, but sparks remain. And this next poem is Marilyn. She arrives, a gardenia in a cellophane box, petals of honeyed air radiating. Each blade of light travels the butt of her dimpled chin, held like a child, holding a buttercup to know the future. It's all there in the corsage of her lips, teeth like snowdrops emerging after the last frost. Her cheeks a landscape of peonies not yet weighted by the heaviness of their heads. The internet loves her, and I love how lashes brush the sky of her face like a bough sprung, and her eyes blooming only now. So one of the things I did when I started to write about Marilyn in her voice is I developed a language, and the language was based on her own writing. What I saw was that she used the punctuation she used ampersands, the little and sign, and she used lawn, what they're called M dashes, which is wonderful because it's M for Marilyn. And she wrote sort of long lines, then short lines. And then I came up, so that was her punctuation that I wanted to mimic. And then I came up with a language for her, which from that poem there you can see is very floral. I use a lot of fruit and flowers. I use a lot of color, and it's beautiful, but there's also this hint of danger and violence throughout, and that is captured as well in the language that I use. So I'm gonna skip to a poem. So poems come back and forth in the speaker's voice, the poet's voice, and then in Marilyn's voice. And this is a poem in Marilyn's voice. What I give of myself. They used to bother me. When people I didn't know touched me, they haven't loved me. No, not really. They say, Marilyn, touch me as if we are friends, lovers, as if we hadn't seen each other in forever. And now the whiff of me, the scent of me, they feel belongs to them. Just don't let them see me sweat, the flush rushing up my throat as they push into my body, a body that is not my body. These days, I don't recognize myself. A photograph, black and white, a flash. So I do what I always do, what I have to. The press of a wallet, the pressure. I turn and smile, blow a kiss that is really nothing, a transaction of air. And can you imagine what Marilyn was living with? To be in the throng. And there's a part of her that sought that out. And it's interesting, I read an academic book on sort of the drama, it's called The Drama of Celebrity, and it's about how celebrities have used media in order to promote to become celebrities, really. And one of the things that Marilyn pioneered was something that this academic called multiplicity. And right now we live in it because we are surrounded by images. You can take something and it can go virtual, and like this video, maybe it'll go virtual, who knows. But that idea of being sort of wall to wall, everywhere you turn you can see something. And Marilyn understood that, and she understood the power of being in the news. And by having her photo in the news, she was able then to have power because she couldn't get it any other way. So she used that. She used that power in order to negotiate her contracts with Fox Studios, in order to ensure that she could get what she wanted, both finance, but also the power that she needed when she created her own production studio. She got that authority by being in the headlines, by being the public's Marilyn. And so it was something she needed to do. And that's what that poem gets at. She needed to do that, but it still took something away from her. It was difficult. And it's really difficult. So I'm going to take a minute and talk a little bit about Marilyn's childhood and that history. And I'd love to hear from many of you about that. But the cover on my book, a little shiny there, is this beautiful photo from Milton Green. And Milton Green, as many of you fans will know, photographed Marilyn extensively through his life. And he became her production partner initially in her production company. So they had a very deep and abiding relationship. And I had the good fortune to be in Paris 2 summers ago, and there was an exhibition in Paris that was called the Divine Marilyn Exhibition. And as it turns out, it was staged by Joshua Green. And it was 200 photos of Marilyn, famous photos, some artifacts that were put together, and they were all in Gallery Joseph. And it was really quite amazing. So I have a poem about coming to that exhibition and encountering that. And then I take over and have Marilyn describe, almost do, when you go into a museum or a gallery, there's a little description of every single piece of art. And this was the same in Gallery Joseph. There was a little description, there was a date, there was where it came from, who the photographer was, so forth. But I imagine Marilyn actually stepping in and sort of rewriting the exhibition notes. So I'll read the poem that starts with me coming to Paris. And at this time, I've been writing about Marilyn for a year, and I felt like she was saturated. And then I arrive in Paris, and literally there are posters all over Paris. And you open any magazine, newspaper, and it's what to do. So stick with me. This will be it's a good long poem, but it'll cover a lot of her life, and then we can talk about that. Divine Marilyn in Paris, July 2019. Here you are on Rue des Écals, in my jet lag, your dress fanning open into a white lily, arms like stamen, grinning for all of Paris. I cross the street. I'm tired of chasing you like a rabbit, but you're everywhere. Divine Marilyn smacked onto every bus stop, metro, cafe. You are what to do in Paris. 200 clichés de Marilyn Monroe réunis à Paris cet été. I am alone in Gallery Joseph with Marilyn. Her eyebrows bridge from wall to wall. Her body of work spreading limber legs from one room to the next, tete-a-tete. I gaze into her gaze, but she looks beyond me to another photograph of Marilyn, looking at another photograph of Marilyn. I'm in a mirrored labyrinth of Marilyn. Next to a burnt stone portrait, I take a selfie. We both wear black dresses, hair pulled back in a chignon. The air stirs as if breathing. I inhale, pull out a pen, and together we rewrite the exhibition notes. 1929, Norma Jean, age 3, with her mother. Mama came and made promises, but stuffed me in a closet. Don't make so much noise, Norma. I was a brown, quiet mouse. Mama fell down the stairs. Her head broke open. So what do we know? We know that Marilyn's mother, grandmother was insane, and then her mother also suffered a mental breakdown and went away. And came back, but then went away for good. And but when she came back, she took her with her, and and would say things, would make her sit in the closet when she had men over. It was not a good experience. Don't make so much noise, Norma. That's what her mother said to her. It was a very tough childhood. So she then went off to be fostered, and it was in the house, it was a family that lived across the street from where her grandmother had lived. So this is titled 1932, Norma Jean at age 6. It was Los Angeles, and our street was a bag of saltwater taffy bought on the boardwalk for a nickel. I didn't have a nickel, but I lived in a mint green farmhouse across the street from the pink bubblegum house that belonged to my grandma. She and Mama went crazy and left me with the goats, chickens, and a herd of foster kids. We sold brown eggs, apples, plums, lemons, and watermelon from our stand. I climbed the big fig tree, watched for Mama's return. So she loved that house, and that was a really good house. But then her mama came and took her away again. And then her mama had to go back into the mental institution, and Norma went into a series of other foster homes. So in 1934, this is Norma Jean at age 8. I was never the girl you keep like a bowl on a shelf. This house, my bowl, the littlest, mustard yellow, chipped on its lip with a crack down the side that sweated soup when us kids elbowed around the Formica table. I read a description of her at this one particular house that really stuck with me, and that's why I wrote that little poem. How she had hand-me-downs. She didn't even have her own dishes, like they gave her the smallest, the most broken, nothing. She was the bottom of the totem pole, always. And then she had to go into an orphanage. And so this poem is about that experience, which is particularly sad. 1935, Los Angeles Orphans Home Society. The sun cut sharp angles down that scratch of dirt road, stopped short of the stone building. Someone had painted the inside walls sidewalk gray, ordered metal tables, chairs, beds, toilets, sheets, once white, now laundered winter gray. Every day I'd run outside into the lit sky, lie on a patch of green weeds before walking to the cinder block school. Its walls were covered with maps, countries the color of saltwater taffy, like my first remembered home. So it was an orphan's home, and there was a wonderful description of it where it was all gray, and they'd go off to school, and there'd be sort of this semi-normal experience, but then come Christmas, they'd have whatever the hand-me-downs were, and every night they'd go to bed in this gray walled cinder block orphanage. So the other thing that really haunted Marilyn her entire life was the inability to know who her father was. And her mother had a photo of him, which looked very much like Clark Gable, which had some consequences for her later when she worked with Clark Gable on The Misfits. She had a sort of larger than life sense of him, I think, because she had this photo in her mind that this man was her father. We don't know really who her father is, but she thought it was Charles Stanley Gifford Sr. And so this poem is called Photo of Charles Stanley Gifford Sr., undated. I will haunt this man, my father, be his last dream as night unspools into day. I will be the white shadow on his gleaming forehead, slicken his hair, shaving nick on his throat. I want to hollow his chin with my knuckle, slice his mouth like an apple, the mouth grinning as it breaches the picture frame. But he's already gone, leaving nothing but a trail of scat for me to follow. And she did. One time, she called his son. She went to a home and knocked on doors. I mean, she did everything she could to try and track down this man. But he would have nothing to do with her, and claimed, as did his son later, that she was not his. So you would think someone would want to claim her. Here she was at the height of her career, and yet, no. Crazy, sad, huh? Okay. So then, come 1942, she is living with her mother's best friend, Grace Gibbon, and who she calls Aunt Grace. And that's a good time for her. And she's in high school, and she's enjoying herself. She's at Hollywood High. It's a good time. And then her Aunt Grace decides to get married. And the sad thing is that with Grace's new husband, they're moving to Chicago. And the new husband has kids of his own and has said there's no room for Marilyn. So Marilyn's got to find a new place to live. And it gets to the place where her Aunt Grace gives her a choice. And I will describe the choice in this. June 19th, 1942, portrait of Norma Jean on her wedding day to Jim Doherty. Instructions for my Aunt Grace at the end of my high school sophomore year. Marriage or the orphanage, your choice, Norma Jean. If I say yes, the dress is iced in lace, and I am a ribbon-tied gift, a statue in honor of him. In my brand new shoes, I am a hand-me-down. Pass me the green beans, and I will mind my P's and queue up for groceries. I will whip up a wife for breakfast and bake rockets and bathe in his glory, and when night growls, I will dutifully give him my promise. Did Marilyn want to be married the minute she turned 16? The minute she turned 16? No. She loved being in high school. She wanted to date and she wanted to do all the things you do in high school. Study. She wanted to study. And yet, this was her fate, and she went into it. But as we know, World War II was breaking out, and so not only was she a young bride, but she had to go to work. So she was working at a munitions factory. Actually, they were creating drones, which is kind of cool. And they sent a photographer, Yank Magazine sent a photographer to go photograph the women working on the line doing the war effort. And David Conover, the photographer, discovered Marilyn. 1944, Yank Magazine pinup of Norma Jean by David Conover. There are so many men, and I find myself wanting to shed even this flimsy skin like a snake, reveal what lies beneath. Instead, I trade a shimmer of my skin for their letters, the envelopes emptying as I swallow each word from dear to love. Does the flash tattoo my flesh with diamonds? Will I dazzle and distract? Does the camera see me? See the blueprint of my bones. If I thrust out my hip, will it save a life? If I tilt my chin, bite my lips, what then? So you can imagine, she's the pinup girl, and she's getting letters from soldiers all over, and yet her husband is on a ship, and he comes back, and he's not happy at all that she is becoming a model. And he tells her to quit, and she says no. And so that marriage ends. She goes off to Reno, which is where he went, and divorces him. And time goes on. She models, and then using that modeling, she leverages it into a contract with Fox, and then they use her sort of as a model to promote films, but she moves along. She's given the name Marilyn Monroe by the studio, and bit by bit she gets some acclaim. And by 1952, she meets Joe DiMaggio, and then things really blow up. 1952, publicity photo with Joe DiMaggio. How quiet he is in this swirling room of cocktails. I flirt, draw my lips into a perfect bow. Amongst the swarm of lit tables, do the two of us glow? He sips Bordeaux while I buzz. How quiet he is. I lean in, a flash of white shoulders, a show. Joe takes my hand in his. How small I've become. A firefly, a moment, a cameo. So at that time, his fame was greater than hers, but she was the hot new thing. And he had retired, so he was sort of diminishing and she was rising. And we know how that dynamic played into the very quick dissolution of their marriage. But one of the other stories that I read about Marilyn, which was really amazing, was the role that she played in establishing Ella Fitzgerald. So Ella Fitzgerald was singing in small little jazz clubs, and Marilyn had become an Ella Fitzgerald fan. In fact, she taught herself how to sing by listening to by listening to Ella Fitzgerald's records. She would play them over and over and over, and that's how she learned to sing. So she was not just a fan. I mean, she was absolutely amazed and and in awe of Ella. And what she realized, though, was that Ella wasn't getting the big clubs. So she went to the owner of the Macambo Club on Sunset Boulevard in LA, in Hollywood, and said, look, if you book Ella Fitzgerald, I will sit in the front table every single night, and I will make sure that everyone else shows up, which meant Joe DiMaggio and Frank Sinatra and all that crowd. And she did. So this poem captures that experience. 1955, with Ella Fitzgerald at the Macambo Club in Hollywood. My table close enough to see her, diaphragm accordioning, each breath licking our ears, purring down our throats, curling. She sways, commands the spotlight. Her low notes throb, and we forget our gin and tonic. Cigarette smoldering, lust. So one of the other things that I discovered in my wild and crazy research into Marilyn was a bunch of auction sites. And there was one auction site that had a diary of Cecil Beaton. And Cecil Beaton was a very big, famous fashion photographer and celebrity photographer at the time. And he had kept a diary that during his shoots. And there was a page in his diary that prompted me to see kind of his point of view. And initially I did an erasure, which is taking someone else's work, in this case it was the page from his diary, and paring it back and just choosing words. And then instead I decided to have Marilyn talk to him. So you may have seen these photographs, but they were shot in Los Angeles, and she's got a carnation. She's in a room. She's sort of lying on a daybed, which is kind of like what I have here, and she's holding carnations. There's birds on the wall in the background, on the wallpaper, and yeah. And I think she loved, Marilyn loved photographers and they loved her. But I think there was also this sort of sense of voyeurism, right? So she was giving something of herself every time she gave a photograph or a session like this. So I tried to capture that in this poem. Los Angeles, June 1956, by Cecil Beaton. His distant eye sees into my future, a surgeon unbuttoning my skin, a bed of cheap carnations, and my promise, soon swelling in water, rising with acid, my startled eyes, fixed for all time, as if to say, leave something a blur. And I have to tell you, it's one of the reasons why I chose this photo. First of all, she's in bed, so it's slumber, but more importantly, it's blurred, and I think Marilyn would have liked that. And this is the last little mini poem in this sequence that was inspired by the Divine Marilyn exhibit in Paris, and it's based on the last sitting that was ever done. It was done by Bert Stern, and was in Los Angeles in June of 1962, so 2 months before she died. These photographs are a bit wild. In many, she's nude or partially nude. She's partially nude. She's got a little filmy on her. But then there's others where she's completely dressed in a black cocktail dress and her hair's up. So there's a lot of variety to this photo shoot and what came out of it. And I was taken by the one where she's dressed as if she's going to a funeral. Los Angeles, June 1962, The Last Sitting with Marilyn by Bert Stern. Me in black, If I am ever a widow, I will mourn color. I will weep for yellow narcissus and grassy meadows ticked with cornflowers. Let me stain my fingertips with cherries. So I'd like to just take a little break and ask if you have any questions, please post them now. I'd love that. And I'm going to have a sip of champagne and to Marilyn, and then I'm going to read a little bit more. So at this moment, what I'm going to do is read a little bit of hers. So this is a poem, or fragments of a poem, because the book is fragments, and it's very much, oops, there goes my scarf. It's very much fragments of poems in her case. And it was written, this was written when she was filming The Prince and the Showgirl, right after she married Arthur Miller. They flew to London, and it was a difficult shoot for a lot of reasons. But Marilyn is getting to know her husband, and they had some rough times because she happened to see some of his writing that made her question whether he really loved her. But she really loved him at that moment. And, it's one of those things where if she hadn't read that, their marriage might have gone a little bit better. Because if you listen to this, she was in love with him. My love sleeps beside me in the faint light. I see his manly jaw give away, and the mouth of his boyhood returns with the softness, softer, its sensitiveness trembling in stillness. His eyes must have looked out wondrously from the cave of the little boy, when the things he did not understand, he forgot. But will he look like this when he is dead? Oh, unbearable fact, inevitable, yet sooner would I rather his love die than or him. So, it's just amazing. She's looking at her love. He's sleeping, and she's seen the little boy in him, and she's feeling this outpouring, and she knows he's older, that he's going to die before her, but she wishes that sooner their love would die, her love would die, or his love would die than him. And sadly, that's what happened, of course. So any questions, feel free to pop them into the comments. And if not, what I'd like to do is jump to the end a little bit. I'm going to read, this last bit is a bit difficult, so I think I'm going to sort of open up into it with something a little easier. It's maybe a little fun. So, as we know, Marilyn became addicted to barbiturates, and it affected her ability to show up to work. And, that was an issue. And in fact, it caused her to get fired by Fox and then rehired by Fox. And, what is not known necessarily is that she had been fired by Fox right before she died. And then because she was so big, they fired her because she went off to sing at President Kennedy's his birthday, Madison Square Gardens, and it was such a big deal. They fired her because she left the set to go do it, but then it was such a big deal that they realized they couldn't fire her, and so they came back and gave her a giant raise, which was great. Of course, then she died 3 days later. Um, but her addiction really caused some issues for her. And so I capture that in sort of a fun way in this poem called Following the Script. The pills were the makeup man and the hairstylist and the costume girl. The pills were the trailer. The mirror lit with little lights and the fridge filled with champagne. They made everything right. No forgotten lines, no forgotten nights, or so it seemed. But I'd forgotten to get out of bed. Then I played it straight for a bit. Was it a week? A month? Nights and days were never so bright. That LA light. I saw palm trees again, fat-headed against the blue sky, and Wilshire Boulevard was so glaring with shiny cars, I had to close my eyes. I had to close my eyes, but couldn't without the pills who whimpered in my medicine cabinet. They followed me into the bedroom, leapt onto the bedside table. They knew how to turn on and off the lamp, how to work a room. The pills were clever that way. They could glad hand into any handbag. Could have had their own show. They were producers, all right. Despite what everyone says, I follow the script. I take direction. So indeed, the pills actually did take over in the end, didn't they? And so what I'm going to do is read a little bit into that. And because this is the 59th anniversary of Marilyn's death, I'm going to read into that. So when I started to write about her death, I first imagined the day before and what that was like. And this poem came out of that. It's called Earthbound. Oh, lemon, I know nothing so sweet, rough, fleshed, fallen fruit. We are so earthbound, standing, knife in hand, peels curl the sink, juice stings each slit, slight, my skin sunlit. Combustible as tinder, a warbler's nest, this short, flaming life. Imagined her at the kitchen, peeling lemons to put in a drink, and sort of having a sense that maybe her life was coming to an end. Maybe, but maybe also some hope. And then I'm going to read this poem. And it's called Hello, It's Me, Marilyn. And so Marilyn died, as many of you may know, in the evening of August 4th, 1962, but her body was discovered on August 5th, 1962, by Dr. Greenson, who was her psychiatrist at the time. She had a couple psychiatrists. He was the main one. He had visited her early the night before at her request, and then she had lied in her room, her bedroom, making phone calls, calling people, talking to people. And we know some of the people that she talked to. And so this poem imagines her lying on her bed, making phone calls. Some of the phone calls we know of, some of them are imagined. And some of them are maybe were in her imagination. So, hello, it's me, Marilyn, August 4th, 1962. Dr. Greenson, are you there? My ears, I can't hear. Dr. Engelberg left me a satchel of pills. I've lined them up along the windowsill like a string of pearls glistening round my neck. I feel lost in someone's garden, ivy and jasmine tangle, a swarm of bees billowing the lavender. They honey and swirl the air. I'm in such a mood. Dr. Greenson, come rescue me. 7:10 p.m. Hello, Peter. Dr. Greenson's just gone. A dinner party tonight? Lovely. But I'm tired, need rest, already in bed, a mess. It's late. I've nothing on. I guess if Bobby's around, I could wear that Balenciaga gown, have Whitey come fix my face. It's been stung. My eyes, my lips, bees everywhere. I know I sound crazy, they swarm. No Bobby? I'll stay home. Kiss Pat goodbye, the president too, and you, sweet guy. And that was based on a phone call that she had with Peter Lawford, who was John and Bobby Kennedy's brother-in-law, and Pat Lawford was her very good friend. So then at 7:27, I imagined her calling Whitey, who was her longtime makeup artist. Whitey, my prince, no need to come over, no president, no brother, no bother. I'm staying in with my hive, I'm their queen, pillowed by the buzz, Whitey, my love. Don't worry, I'll sleep off this sadness, I promise, tomorrow. And this is then to her father, that she never knew. 10:23 p.m., and you can see a lot of time has gone by, and she's become less rational. She's taken more barbiturates, and it's having its effect. I dreamt I had a father handsome as Clark Gable. At night he'd hum me to sleep, and I dream I had a father who dreamt he had a daughter. He found her in the phone book under Pretty. He found her at the orphanage in the city, lost amongst the wingless angels, piles of fallen stars. He found her drinking whatever's in style. Daddy, look me in the eye. You know it's me, your girl, the child you've never seen. Don't hang up. I'm your Norma Jean. So sadly, Marilyn had a series of miscarriages, and it was her great disappointment. And this next section is written from that point of view about that. 10:49 p.m. Hello, little jelly bean. Hush, baby child. I lost you in the wilderness when you fled like a rabbit. I lost you in the ocean when you swam with rainbow fins. I lost you down the drain, a diamond ring. I lost my grip on you, sweet pink thing. Shush, don't cry. I lost you in a pillbox, but shush, don't tell a soul. I lost you, you were just a gust. I lost you to the bees, my head's a buzzy hive. They stung my babies and left me alive. And finally, at 11:24 p.m., I imagined her calling her mother as her last call. Mama, remember me waving from up in the fig tree? You wore lemon yellow, you laughed, remember that. Before the bees, hear them sing, flickering wings. A little thought to Marilyn. I sometimes imagine her as Gloria Steinem did in, Gloria Steinem wrote a whole book of essays on Marilyn, which is sort of amazing, this huge feminist, the big feminist, to have written these essays about Marilyn. But she, in them and in the foreword to it, she says, I imagine Marilyn as a grandmother, and now, of course, she'd be a great grandmother, and what she would have achieved. And yeah, so, you know, maybe we'll never know. So I'm going to end with 2 more poems. And I want to thank those of you who were able to join, and for those of you who will have the opportunity to watch this later, and it's been such a joy and pleasure to be able to spend these years with Marilyn and to understand what made her so special, why she endures all these years later, and what we have to learn from her and what we have in common with her. And so this next poem is called All I Ever Wanted, and it's in a funny form, which if you see it, and I will, I hope you have a chance to buy and read this book, and I look forward to your comments when you do. But it's an abecedarian, and an abecedarian is a poem where the first letter goes all the way down, A, B, C, D, G, through the alphabet. But in this case, because Marilyn was so clever, it's a zigzag abecedarian, which is a very tricky thing to do. And I just figured that would be exactly what Marilyn would do. All I ever wanted: an ermine-lined raincoat and a pocketbook full of barbiturates taken by the handful, washed down with champagne. Fridge stocked with good bubbly. I love doctors too. A doctor a day makes the sad go away. Everything. I want everything to be swell for my friends. My friends keep me alive, they honestly do. God gave me a childhood from hell and no father, but heaven help me. I have real talent and work I so love. I will never give it up, not for any Joe, not even my Joe, my hero, my savior, not for the Kennedy I've kissed or two. I suppose real love is rare. I fall in love, but there's not one man that I have truly loved. Men love me, or they love Marilyn Monroe, that is, naked as a jay. I don't mind naked, it's just skin, open me up, and you'll find a woman inside who reads poetry. Loves it, and jazz and art, and oh gosh, Arthur, he questioned my intelligence before I even met him. I'd read his plays and all the great books, and at UCLA I studied history. I'm a student of life. Holy moly, if only things had been different. Mama's brain healthy and life's ugly stuff like crap men and contracts, sexism, addictions, and violence gone. But would there be a Marilyn Monroe? Would she exist if Norma Jean hadn't become the X-rated beauty queen? Sexual dream doll. And would you be here reading my thoughts decades after a man zipped a bag over my thighs, breasts, and baby blue eyes? I don't know. Would we? I mean, that's the whole thing. Would we, if she had become a 96-year-old great-grandmother? I don't know. We'll never know. But what we do know is that Marilyn has made a giant difference in the world, and she's left a big, big legacy. And I've certainly learned a lot from her. And I learned a lot writing in her, as her, and about her. And one of the things that I learned in the process was how to sleep. So that is the gift that she gave to me. So I will finish by reading the last poem in the book, which is called Then I Slept. First, there was the lemon peel of morning, then the empty space in the bed, still warm, my love's body held in the slight indentation, then the clatter of his oatmeal and tea, and beyond that, a neighbor's whistle, a dog's rugged bark, a man calling out as a car door slams. I slept in, slept through the night. I slept without Ambien's dark fist pressing my pillow, slept all night. My love questions God's existence, but I hear the weather is warming this week. Our plum tree is cotton ball. The heavy perfume of Daphne drifts through an open window, and a hummingbird whirs over the forsythia. In the stacked white boxes up the hill, the honeybees doze. Thank you for joining me, and thank you for your love of poetry and your love of Marilyn Monroe. I wish all of you a happy journey, and please email me, text me, um, you know, send me notes on Facebook. I'd love to hear from you, and I am here for questions or any thoughts at any time. Have a good night. Thanks a lot.